Hello and welcome to the show. So, as you know, the last couple of days I've been having lots of interesting guests, people that move and shake the city and shake the country, and one of them is JP Smith. Mr. Smith, welcome to the show.
Hi, Faizal.
So I know your portfolio is this huge portfolio and people know exactly what you do and how you do all of that, but today I wanted to do one thing, and that was I wanted to speak to JP Smith. Sort of shell away all those portfolios, take away all those layers that people know you for.
You're assuming there's a person left in all that robotic work.
I'm trying to find that person before the interview. I know that he's there and I know he's going to come out now. JP Smith, where did it all start?
And where was I born? In a bright, shiny centre of nowhere called Kuilsriver. I think I was officially born in Stellenbosch, but I grew up in Kuilsriver, spent the first 29 years of my life in Kuilsriver, where every 45 minutes nothing happens, and it happens reliably.
No, of course.
It's a very dull place, but it wasn't a bad place to grow up. It was relatively crime-free.
So you're one of how many kids and that sort of thing?
2 kids and 1 adopted sister.
Okay, so the childhood, how do you define the childhood? I know that before the show you spoke to me and you said very basic childhood, normal home, that sort of thing. People don't normally see that when they look at you. They probably think that you come from the Constantius and that sort of thing, and you debunked that myth with me earlier on.
No, I'm pretty solid blue-collar stock. I still feel out of sorts if I go to anything like a fancy restaurant and stuff. I prefer to buy takeaways from Eastern Bazaar in town and in Darling Street and not go to a fancy restaurant. I won't go to anything more fancy than a family restaurant at best. I grew up, my father was a construction site worker for most of my youth, and he later on joined the ambulance service, became an ambulance medical assistant, and eventually when the ambulance service was provincialised, he stayed with the city and joined the disaster risk management service. So I remember an ANC councillor once saying it's nepotism, and I said, yes, I think my father got me my job as a councillor, which of course is a joke. There's no way my father as a disaster management official could do that. But yeah, it ended up coincidental that where he ended his career is the directorate which I later became involved in.
Which is interesting. So
strange bit of destiny.
Yes, of course. But your parents, how do you define them? Were they sort of pushing you out there to become something? Because generally people that's in your position and that has sort of climbed that societal ladder seems to have had some sort of push or drive and motivation from the parent side.
Yes and no. I mean, my mother was a cashier in a shop in Belleville, and eventually worked in a shop in Kuilsriver. And when the owner sold it, she bought the shop. That was her first venture into doing something for herself. My brother and I helped her to buy the shop, and a little home industry shop, Tuisnywerheid, and she's still involved. Over the age of 70 now, she's still working, and she's still running a little shop. So yeah, they're self-motivating people. They're people who taught us self-reliance, not to expect anything from somebody else, to have basic respect. I think we were lucky that while we grew up in a very conservative Afrikaans era, my parents had contempt for any kind of racist attitudes, and we were never taught any of that. We were never burdened with any of that rubbish. I didn't have to grow up thinking any of that stuff. And so later on in school, when I started developing my own political consciousness, it drifted towards initially the Communist Party and in conscription campaign, and later on the PAC at university, and not in other directions.
So are you saying that the political move in your life happened over a period, or did this happen by default, or was there something in your childhood that you felt that politics is where I need to be because it might be a vehicle for change? Because you appear to be very around the aspect of change and developing change and pushing for change.
If you asked about parental push, I think the only place where I recall my father was, he would be irritable with us if we were idle. He would say, do something constructive, get out and mow the lawn, read a book, do some programming on your computer. I worked weekends at video stores and at a shop in Belleville near the station, where I worked on Friday afternoons and Saturdays and did stock takes and stuff there for pocket money. Later on I DJ'd in nightclubs in Stellenbosch and on a mobile DJ.
I must say,
Laugh aloud. Yes, laugh if you must.
That's
I
a
would.
serious one.
I expect nothing but a laugh or mirth on that topic.
It's just it just doesn't go with the image that you have right now.
And the joke is, if you saw what I was playing, it was everything from heavy metal to hip hop
Right.
and house music. So that's certainly not something. In fact, the one guy I DJ'd with at the time told me the other day that he's doing some mobile gigs again just for the fun of it, and invited me to come out with him. I might actually go out and DJ with him again. And I keep my ear in. I do some DJing at home occasionally, just on my PC at home with some of the
I can't think that
PC applications.
your neighbors would be sitting and saying, is that coming from JP's place? Like, I can't see that, but anyway.
So in any case, so that was how I put myself through varsity and stuff. And my father did teach us to be productive, and I think from my parents I learned the desire to be useful. And I mean, if I have to define myself, I would say I have a desire to be useful, to mean something, to add value. To just sit by and watch the world tick by and be content with it, that I can't live with. So there has to be value added. You have to justify your existence. You don't get to exist just for the sake of being around. You have to do something useful. You have to add some value, whether you're volunteering at an organization or you're a police reservist, or you're making small little daily contributions in the area around you. You've got debit orders running for some NGOs, but you have to add value.
You have to add value. It's interesting you mentioned that, that Muhammad Ali just passed away. And I know, looking at one of his sayings in the last few days, where he said that the things that you do for other people is the rent that you pay for your time on earth.
Absolutely.
And I suppose you perhaps have a very...
The Dalai Lama says something similar, which he talks about your happiness being shortened, but people whose focus is entirely on their own existence being daily frustrated by the fact that every day a few small things will go wrong with you, and if your whole of your existence, your whole of your world focus is yourself, it will be poisoned daily by all the little irritations that cross your path. But if you are a person whose world focus is much broader than your own irritations and the things that happen to you pale by comparison to what you see daily. So the whole of Saturday I was in Langa. We did a variety of activities. We did things with the old age home. So I get to spend a lot of time. I'm a proportional counsellor now, allocated to Lanka. I used to be in the Atlantic Seaboard. After 10 years, I definitely didn't want to do that anymore, because it starts to stigmatize you and it starts creeping into your soul. Correct. So I wanted to be exposed to a very different environment. I volunteered to go work in Lanka. My party allocated me there, as PR counsellors are allocated. And that, I must say, has been an incredibly rewarding experience. And at the end of Langa, and even last night when I went to go see my parents, I go see them every week, we were talking about stuff, and I just was reminding them of how much perspective that gives you. You meet people and you talk to people who say we're poor, or this is hard, or that's tough in your life, and then you go do an afternoon's worth of work in an informal settlement. And that is a perspective reset button. That gives you a little bit of a sense of relativity in your own hardships, and gives you a sense of appreciation for what you have.
Great. So it's the kind of thing where you say that I got up this morning and I have a bit of a headache kind of thing, and then you go out and you see somebody that doesn't have this and that, and you say, where are my headaches sitting?
Well, you complain about that you scuffed your rim of your car, or something small and petty happened, or you broke something at home, or your cell phone screen cracked, or all these small things that aggravate your day every day. But if your world perspective is broader than yourself, those things matter little. And I think a lot of people can be a lot happier if they spend a bit more time doing for other people. And they'll be happier not for some weird fuzzy logic. They'll be happier because they have perspective. What we often lack in life, I think, is perspective about what's happening in the world around us. And I spend a lot of time talking to people on the phone who complain. I mean, a big part of my life is filled with complaints, and it toxifies your soul. It toxifies your consult, because as a counselor, you're a complaint center. And people will complain to you about stuff that's so ridiculous and so lacking in perspective that you sometimes just want to shake them and say, seriously, you're complaining about grass growing through your verge. Perspective. You really need perspective, because this afternoon I'm going to go deal with a man in a wheelchair who is bedridden now and can't even help himself on the most basic level, whose medical expenses is such that he can't cope, who is struggling to find food, whose family who has no living relatives, and who is struggling just to achieve the most basics. Perspective is a very useful and healthy thing.
It's very interesting you're saying that. Going back to to the aspect of religion. How did religion sort of fit into your upbringing? I'm assuming that you perhaps came from the Christian faith and that sort of thing. Did it play a major role in defining your thoughts today? Because your thoughts appear to be very focused and very morally inclined. And I'm trying to sort of find the basis where that could have been born from.
Not religion. I'll say something that'll probably earn me more than a few detractors. I'm not a religious person. I admit that wherever I go, I work with many churches and religious people and faith-based organizations, and I always remind them that I'm not a religious person. I'm an atheist. And I find that...
You are an atheist?
I'm an atheist, sir. And I find that you can have a strong moral compass no matter what your religious persuasion, that your morality is something you need to explore continuously and evaluate. You cannot derive your morality holus bolus from some document or some abstraction external to yourself. That may inform it. You can read Karl Marx, you can read the Bible, you can read the Torah, or you can read the Quran. You can read writings from people who can shape your thinking, but ultimately you are accountable for your own, the moral code you live by. And I believe that you can have such a moral code without deriving it from religion. And if you're a moral person, you'll find that much of what religion teaches, its adherence, is stuff that you will naturally embrace. You will believe in not detracting from others, not doing harm to others, in wanting to see a world where, the common saying that we use is be the change you want to see, the lead SA mentality, the more vernacular version of that is what goes around comes around, not imparting harm to other people if you don't want to harm, impart it yourself. That you cannot see a world where if everybody is doing harm to each other, that is sustainable. So if you have a practical moral code, that code does not have to be informed by religion, and I would suggest to you that mine is not. You might say, well, actually you brought it with you as a package from your childhood when you were in Sunday school and stuff, and that's quite possibly true. Correct. But it isn't now, and I'm a very moral person. I measure every action I do by my morality. And I think one of the biggest failings in South Africa, when you and I were speaking before this, you said there is a psychosis developing in South Africa with fear of crime and the prevalence of crime and the perceptions around the prevalence of crime and people's anxiety about it, the sense that we feel beleaguered, that we go into a bunker mentality where our walls and our doors have to be thicker and heavier.
Survival.
Yes, and I would tell you there's another psychosis that feeds our country that is pushing us in a direction that is unhealthy for a country to be in, and that's the lack of personal responsibility. If I have to define our national morality by one thing, it is the lack of personal responsibility. The fact that people refuse to take responsibility. You see it in the national leadership of our country, where nothing is ever anybody's fault, everything is deflected, blamed, everything is a lawsuit, an inconclusive legal process, an inconclusive disciplinary action, which is announced but never concluded, and so there's never any consequences for actions. And all in all, South Africa is sliding in a direction where we've all learned to deflect and abdicate and hide from blame, refuse to man up to what it is that we do. That, for me, is something that in the long run we will pay for in countries which have less resources than us, but are more successful than us. Remember, I lived for a long time in Malaysia. There, I think you see countries that are taking a different view on this, where there is a much greater sense of personal work ethic and much greater personal responsibility for what happens, where people fess up to what they've done and deal with what they've done and face the consequences. And that will ultimately define our success or failure as a country, I think.
JP, do you define yourself as a disciplinarian by nature? Because you sort of come across that way, and I understand that perhaps the job that you do requires you to make sure things are in the book all the time. But has it become part of you? Because I'm going to use the term, and I think we used it before the show. It's still extremely robotic in my view, and I'm trying to understand, and I somehow understand that you've got this one particular drive, and that's to make this world a better place. And I see that. But is there not a part of you that sometimes wants to just say, you know what, let me just be for the day where I want to be?
Absolutely, and that you get to do. I mean, there's the schism between one's public personality. I am the maker member for safety and security. Part of that means you're enforcing bylaws and other rules. South African government in the moment, I believe, is in a place where we've become extremely concessionaire, where it is becoming very difficult to keep processes running. to keep systems running, to keep the integrity in systems running, where everything is becoming a sliding scale of negotiability. And in that context, I decided a long time ago, or several years ago, that my function was going to be the villain of the story. That I would have to make peace with the fact that I might not have as popular a public persona as I could have, but that I was going to have to put my foot down and make sure that council stuck to its systems. Our mayor is also like that in many ways. Internally, she's very strict. Her public persona, though, is more forgiving, is more allowing. I'm afraid mine is the reverse. So I'm the villain of the story who has to make sure law enforcement does what it's supposed to do, that we uphold systems and that our systems have integrity. That definitely doesn't make you popular. In my personal relationships, I'm far more relaxed and yielding. I don't even remember a slight against me. I'm the kind of person who, if you do something bad, later on I will encounter somebody and a friend of mine will say, but I'm surprised you're working with so-and-so. Remember what he did to you? And I'll go, oh, actually, I've forgotten about that. So I don't believe on a personal level, I'm not a vindictive person. I'm not a person who tries to enforce rules on somebody. I'm the person who writes off debts and is forgiving. I'm going to be a terrible parent because I have no idea how I'm going to impart. I'm always going to be the good parent.
Which is very interesting.
I'm always going to be the forgiving parent. My partner had better have a disciplinarian streak in them, because when it comes to disciplining children and pets, I'm afraid I'm terrible.
Yes, of course.
So
we look at
there's a difference between the public life and the private life.
No, of course. So we look at JP and we just go with, let's say, a Sunday afternoon. Everyone's gone. The guys that normally pick you up and take you to work, and everyone's disappeared. What do you?
Sadly, that doesn't happen on Sunday because your cell phone is on and your work follows you home.
Right.
So I mean, for yesterday.
Are you saying you don't have?
Yesterday I had about 22 phone calls during the day. 24, I don't know, I stopped, I didn't count, but so sadly the cell phone is the ubiquitous present. It is the consistent feature in your life.
It's the link to the outside world.
Yes, my friends always say that if there's a fire, I'm going to run in and save the cell phone before I save anybody else. But yes, on the days that you do switch off, I have made an attempt at clawing back some of my personal time. Some years ago, I was sitting in my office one day during my leave and looking out of my window and seeing people paraglide on Signal Hill. And for years I'd wanted to paraglide. I saw the guys flying. I rented a place in the Atlantic seaboard. And it's something I always wanted to do, was to fly. So I eventually said to myself, this is what's wrong with you, dude. You're on leave, you're sitting in your office. I phoned the company whose name I saw on the side of a vehicle. And I started my lessons a few days later. I actually felt so guilty about taking leave in my leave, about not being at work, that I actually only took half day. So I went to go only in the afternoons.
This was to try flying?
This was for me an adjustment. It was an awkward adjustment. And then I had to go do my first practical session, and I actually didn't own any informal clothes. I had nothing more formal than chinos. I didn't own jeans or even a tracksuit. So I went to go buy a tracksuit, which on my first flight I shredded against a barbed wire fence.
And that's a sign that you haven't been living for many years.
That is a sign that you probably have abdicated and given away more of your life than you should have. And I'm pretty sure that when I'm lying on my deathbed, the one thing I'm not going to be saying is I should have spent more time at work. So I'm trying to get some balance in the equation. I think that an unhealthy life is not just not working hard enough, it's also not making enough time for your friends and family. And of that, I've definitely been guilty.
No, of course. Here's my personal opinion, and I probably go through a very similar streak like you. I'm just not sure if you're able to do that. That is my personal opinion. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to do that.
My PA is very helpful. She does help me block out time in my diary for private life. So I've become a little bit more fastidious on that. I actually said no to a meeting in Langa yesterday afternoon. I was very proud of myself. I just said no.
But think about this. If you have to block out time in your diary that says personal life, I'm sure that's a problem too. Yeah. But because you're actually defining the time for personal life. And I think that might be an issue. JP, this is my take.
But there are two important activities that I do like and that I do set time for. The one is board gaming, where I do some board gaming. I try once a week at least. And it usually starts late at night, but we do try and keep it together a group. And we also go and teach board games to kids across the Cape Flats. Because I am a geek, and I'm a proud geek, and I do believe that the geek shall inherit the earth. I think it's a typo in the Bible. It meant to say the geek shall inherit the earth, not the meek. And so I'm trying to teach many more kids to be geeks, because we will run the planet, and we do already. Everybody else might not have noticed, but we run the planet. So I want more to create more geeks, and the other one is my paragliding, which I enjoy. I had a bit of a mishap in December. I injured my arm quite badly. So it's been a couple of operations, 3 operations to fix that. But I intend to be back in the air in the next next couple of weekends. So those are the two things I do try and make time for. And other than that is gym early in the morning.
No, of course. So, okay, there is something that's going on
something that
in your
resembles a life.
personal life, of course. So there's a life-defining moment in your life that defines who you are as JP today. What do you square that down to? What was it that defined you as a person today? I know that sometimes it's a host of things that happen along a timeline, but there's something that goes on somewhere that says, I'm this person today because of this person or because of this issue. What is that?
It's difficult to say. I think three things. My parents and the kind of social conscience they imbibed, the sense of fairness and sense of fair play. Early on, I worked in a video store for pocket money, and the guy I worked with had a spectacular collection of books, and I would get boxes of sci-fi books from him, which I would consume with great enthusiasm. And amongst these was some
form of escapism.
Absolutely. Well, I liked reading, and I used to read prolifically. Sadly, life doesn't allow me that much time. The stack on my bedside table of books I want to read is getting ever taller. And is going to fall over on me in bed one night and kill me. But in between those were some books on Communist Manifesto, and I think that shaped a part of my political consciousness and what I think of as fair and what we owe to who. And then I would say another person who made a big impact, and I don't think he intended to do so, but inadvertently by hanging out with him, was a guy called Musha Swartz, who was a friend of mine I acquired at Stellenbosch University. He was a master's student, and he was very active in Kaimandi, and I spent a lot of time with him in Kaimandi, intermittently staying there. And I developed a lot of ideas from him about how life works and what you're owed. And he was he was a moralist and a very clear thinker. He had strong views on what needed to happen in South Africa to correct it, and strong political views. And then I would say early friendships across the Cape Flats that helped me not just be a product of the suburbs of Kuils River and the white suburbs, that I developed social acquaintances and practically lived in Mitchell's Plain for a while and had friends in Belhar and elsewhere, which broadened my horizons a bit and gave me a different sense of what is happening in our city and in our world.
So those were defining moments for you. So we look at South Africa today and we see a very challenging space for youth. There are economic pressures, there are general societal pressures and issues that are going on that sort of puts the burden on their shoulders to perform and to develop. And there's political pressures that go on with all of that. And you sort of in the center of the know-how of all of that. What's your advice to them? There are people watching the show that wants to be the next JP Smith, the person that goes out that says,
for God forbid, they can be so much more. But yes.
It says that, you know what, there's a man that sticks to his guns, that sits with his models, that's trying to help change this society, that's not sitting back and saying, oh, look at all the problems we have, but says, let's change all of that, and change is a big factor. What's your advice to them?
Get educated. Don't get pregnant. Don't get someone pregnant.
Yeah, I was about to say it takes two to tango there.
Yes. So keep your life unencumbered. Make sure that you're not picking up habits that will trip you up later in life. And there's lots of peer pressure and lots of smoking and drugs and liquor and other stuff that can make you make mistakes. You know, I'm quite a fan of the Dalai Lama, and I was privileged to go see him twice when he spoke in South Africa before he was banned from entering. And I saw him in the company gardens in Kirstenbosch, not company gardens, in the Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens. And somebody said to him, you preach all this pacifism, but it's a bit incongruous with South Africa. You know, we're a violent country. And he said, no, well, you must do those practical things to keep yourself safe. Have a tall wall, have a big dog, you know, exercise common sense. But he says, when you go home, make a list of all the bad things that's ever happened to you. And next to it, honestly, write the name of the person who caused it. The exam you failed because you didn't study, the job you failed because you didn't prepare, the girl you got pregnant because you were irresponsible, the accident caused you because you were drunk. Make a list of all these things. And when you look at the list of names next to it, maybe one or two is the guy in the ski mask, but the vast majority of things that go wrong in your life will be you yourself. You'll be the architect of your own misery. Make wise decisions and you can have a much better life. So I think a lot of kids who are born in Cape Town under circumstances where life is not handing it to them on a platter, where they've got a tough life, where what their parents are doing and what their community is giving to them puts them at a massive disadvantage. And I'm not going to pretend that the playing field is level for everybody. It's a lot easier in some communities to get ahead than others. And that's true around the world. But I think if you take stock of where you're at and you make decisions that serve your own interest and you're conscious about what you decide and why you decide it, you can have better outcomes. I have friends and I know people who have come from very trying and very tough backgrounds, who have made it and who have cut it and who didn't get any favors and who weren't connected to any political friends or colleagues and who didn't get any easy rides, who have made it. And they've made it because they've taken responsibility for themselves. They haven't waited for somebody to do for them. They've studied, they've worked. There is no substitute for work ethic. You can blame and gaan aan with everybody and blame everybody else for your failings. Ultimately, you must fight for what you want and you must earn what you want. Nobody's going to hand it to you. And I'm afraid increasingly in South Africa, I think we're advocating a culture that does not emphasize those elements, but emphasizes a culture of entitlement. I know it's become a flippant comment to make, but I see it in my own environments. I see it with my own colleagues. I see it with my own friends. So you have to be willing to go out and earn what you want. And that's why we've created a thing like the Metro Police Youth Academy, where young people are recruited into the Metro Police Youth. They become cadets. We occupy their time with service to the community and service to other people, with learning things. And the two keywords, respect and choice. And we're now recruiting the first of them as senior cadets. They're starting to do EPWP work for us. Those are our future leaders. All of them are youth at risk. All of them were kids who, if had been left to their own trajectory, I think the odds were stacked against them. They would most likely have ended up in a very difficult place. And I want to see how this first 86 of them are working with us, and hopefully one day we can reach every youngster with something similar, and we're hatching plans to make that possible, to reach many more young people with this message and the opportunities to build on their own lives. But ultimately, it's only you who can make that call for yourself. Your parents can set your back, your family and your back, your community can set you back. You can start out poor, but you will ultimately be the determinant of your own future. I also know rich people who have seen ruin and collapse, who were given everything to start with and who didn't appreciate it, and who ultimately have failed because they didn't appreciate and they didn't respect what they had.
Great. JP, you are seen as a successful person in what you do, and many people look up to you, although you might not probably realize that, but you're a role model of sorts. And so with that, there's somebody that you need to thank, and or maybe there's some people that you thank along the timeline of your life. Who will that be in conclusion?
I think the people I mentioned before, my parents, my ex-wife and very good friend, Ingrid, who shaped a lot of my consciousness and awareness of what it is like to be in life. I have friends who are honest critics and are not panderers, who don't tell me what I want to hear, but tell me the painful truth about things I say. Will come to him and say, really, you said this or you did that, or do you realize what the implications of this is? So to everybody who's honest with you, the people you work with who tell you the truth and not just tell you want to hear, those are really the people you must embrace. It's often your friends who just tell you what you want to hear are really not ultimately your friends. I think I probably owe a greater debt to my parents than I can ever acknowledge. So I'm about to take the step of moving in with them. I have sold my place and we're busy getting a place together, so I'm going to be cohabiting with my folks.
So you're returning back home?
I'm giving back a little bit belated, and probably if I stack up all the interest I owe them for, 20, 30 years of investment in me, the debt is probably unpayable, but I'm certainly going to give it a shot. I must tell you, I'm an optimist about our city. I think we have an awesome city. I've traveled just enough to know what a privilege it is to live here and how great this place is. And I think we're going to be an interesting story in years to come. We will be telling a very different version of the history of our country. And there's a lot of positive stuff that comes out of Cape Town, but we have a couple of huge challenges: the gangsterism and the crime in our communities, the unemployment, the housing crisis. And how we deal with those will tell us the kind of city we're going to be in 10 years. But my call, the reason I say all this, is my call is to the rest of the public. You know, Lead SA is driving a campaign. We're trying to mobilize people to join reserve services and volunteer services. And sorry, I'm lapsing back into work. My call is to people to get involved, not to sit by and watch the world tick by and complain, but get involved and do something.
So
don't do it just for the other people. Do it for yourself, because you'll be so much a richer person for it.
Of course. JP, thank you for joining me. I feel that we need to do a host of programs going down the line in the future, because you have so much to say and to share. And for one to sort of do that in one program, it's just not doing justice. Thank you for coming.
Shukran or terima kasih for having me on. I appreciate it. And I hope we can do a lot more with you. I'd like community television stations to do more coverage of some of the programs the city does, because I'm always surprised by how little the communities know of the positive things they can plug into. They don't know where those opportunities for them lie, and the city should be doing more with community stations to allow people to see where those opportunities are for them to plug into resources.
Correct. I think we give you that commitment that if we know about those kind of things, we're happy to come out and make sure that the public is informed about that. JP Smith, finally on the program, they say that whatever you do for others is yours to keep forever, and whatever you keep for yourself, you will lose forever at the time of your death, of course. And I think JP is an embodiment of that, somebody that makes that change and wants to be the change that he sees. Until next time, goodbye.